So let's ask the question why the technology for flushing of toilets exists. First and foremost is to have the necessary background for these toilets and why, as human beings, as individuals, as users, we flush and why we have a flush toilet. Let us go back into the history of the toilet revolution. This trajectory of how the flush came about has been there for more than 4,000 years, when sewage and drainage or wastewater drainage systems were in existence in India, in the Mohenjo-Daro area. But it was the Greeks that started to add a little bit more structure to it in its planning of the cities. And we started to see formal introduction to sewage or drainage of wastewater in the 1700 BC. It's the Romans then that started to do a little more engineering about 300 AD. And then you saw the development of the first toilet chair as a commodity in the 1400s. But the real movement and shape towards this flush paradigm started with Sir John Harington. He was the first person that invented the cistern to flush the toilet. With him came Alexandra Cummings from the UK, who developed the first S-bend, which we now call the P-trap, to stop backflow of wastewater and to prevent any odors from reaching the toilet seat and pan. And thus, the British introduced the water closet, for Queen Victoria. But the scale up of this flush solutions or the sewer solutions and technology was actually done by John Snow, who was a health practitioner and not an engineer. John Snow, during the height of the cholera outbreaks in the UK, plotted all the incidences of cholera in the city and demonstrated the relation of poor sanitation to the cholera outbreak. And this is where it led to the Great Stink in London in 1858, where we saw a lot of mortalities due to a sanitation problem through cholera. Between 1859 and 1875, cholera and waterborne diseases had started to decline by the introduction of this wastewater conveyance systems. John Snow led to the flourishment of the sewer industry, offering the convenience to human waste to be taken away from settlements and from the city to be disposed into the environment. And sanitation has been regarded as one of the most impactful health interventions in humankind over the years. However, we have got stuck into this flush paradigm, which has become the gold standard for many years around the world. And all cities are shaped with this kind of drainage pattern, where there is a sewer, a wastewater treatment, and the treated effluent, which is safe, goes back into the river. And as we see in the modern world, most cities aspire to this technology platform. However, in rural areas where there's less densities, we see this in the form of on-site sanitation systems and largely populated by septic tanks and their equivalents. And in the developing world, we see more drier versions of these sanitation systems as well as semi-liquid systems. So generally, we have two types of sanitation technology options available currently as the dominant pathways to deal with sanitation. But what this has done to the world that it's created a large element of inequality. Because in this modern world, where you are born determines the toilet you get. Waterborne for the affluent, and a hole in the ground for the poor in many developing countries. And this is because of the constraints to financing these modern waterborne systems. But as we move into the world, there are many sanitation pressures. People talk about a water crisis, but in reality, it's really a sanitation crisis, since cities have to deal with human waste. There is no alternative sanitation solutions in modern cities without water. When you have extreme weather conditions due to climate change, we reach water stresses. Then sanitation immediately becomes the problem area, because where do people defecate? And how do you transport human waste away from the city when you do not have water to convey such? And similarly, even in floods, when infrastructure is damaged, that impacts the whole sanitation environment. So what you start seeing in the modern world around the big water crisis is actually a sanitation crisis. And this is fueled by aging infrastructure, unsustainable infrastructure, systems which add to the burden of the sanitation pressure. This, coupled with population growth and rapid urbanization, as well as large elements of informality in the developing world, are all the current challenges that face sanitation in the future.